Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome you to the 26th lecture of the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Let's have a recap of lecture 25, which was on change management. We saw that what are the different forces in the organization's environment that are affecting the organization. So we discussed the macro environment of the organization, and a number of factors involved in the macro environment that we discussed were the technological factors, such as the technological innovations, the product changes that force the organizations to make changes in their products or in their services in order to fit themselves in line with the technological changes. Then we had a discussion of the different different demographic factors that are influencing the organizations, such as the composition of the workforce, the labor force composition, in a way that now more and more diverse people from the diverse backgrounds were entering the labor force, and resultantly they're posing the diversity management issues for the organizations, and they have the implications for the organizations in terms of the higher number of the graying population, and because of the lower percentages of the young people entering the labor force because of the declining population growth rate. And we discussed a number of other issues relating to the demographic composition, which are forcing the changes in the organizational environment. Then we had also a discussion on the economic factors that are influencing the organization, such as the changes in the interest rates, changes in the inflation rates, and the economic booms and the economic recessions, how they affect the organization. You all need to think of the different, such as the changes in the economy as a result of the 9/11 attacks, the economic sanctions that were imposed on the organizations or on the operations in the Pakistan, the import and export ratios and the quotas, and the tariff rates, etc. So all these factors they have, and then the implications of the international trade agencies and the other international bodies, what implications they have, the changes in their rules and regulations, how they influence the organizations in a country, the changes taking place internationally, how they influence the organizations in a country. So these are all the different, and then the changes in the other import and export ratios from the economy, such as China, how they are influencing our market, right? How the Chinese exports, they have spread so much globally, and in the developing countries such as Pakistan as well. What are the challenges for this kind of regime and for the free trade regime to the infant industries in Pakistan and to the other industries in Pakistan which are not that competitive? How, when they have to compete in a free trade regime where they will no more be protected by way of the trade barriers, when they have to compete with the low priced goods of the other exporting countries, what are the influences for those organizations of this kind of regimes, right? So there are a number of factors in the macro environment that influence the organization and that have implications for the organization to make changes in order to stay in business and in order to keep competitive. Because if they won't change in response to those driving forces which are bringing the change, then they won't be able to keep pace with the market economy. They won't be able to keep pace with the competitors, and they will be left behind, and they will ultimately be forced out of business. Then we see that how the changes that are faced by the organization, that they are or that occur in the organization, they can be planned or they can be unplanned. I give you an example of the unplanned changes, wherein a plant manager, or a hotel manager has to respond to the combined request of the employees that if they are not given the flex time, they will quit the hotel and they will search the job elsewhere where they are given more flexibility to work. So that is a form of that is a type of unplanned change that we discussed. Then we also had a discussion of the planned changes, that how, for example, an organization, it wants to restructure itself, or it wants to bring in, it wants to consolidate. Then how that consolidation attempt on the part of the organization, as a result of that consolidation attempt, what are the steps that the organization is going to take. For example, if it has three manufacturing plants, and it wants to close down one manufacturing plants, or it wants to close down two manufacturing plants and merge that into the other other manufacturing plant. So this is a consolidation strategy that the firm is using, and how it is going to materialize that consolidation. What are the implications for the different departments of the organization, of the plants that are going to shut down, and what about their human resources, and what about their assets and the other infrastructure, and what are the implications for the human resources of the plant that is going to stay. So what are the how the firm is going to execute all those changes, how it is going to if it has to lay off some of the employees, how it has to communicate those layoff decisions to those employees of the manufacturing plants that are going to be shut down, and how it is going to use a fair procedure in laying off some of the employees while keeping behind some others. What are the influences of such layoffs for the survivors, for the motivation of those survivors, about the commitment of those survivors, right? So it has a number of implications, how the firm has to bring changes in the behaviors of the survivors, and how it has to manage the behavior of the survivors, how it has to manage the behavior of the people who have been laid off, because it might be quite devastating for them, and they might become very violent, right? And so these are the number of a few changes that the organization will have to face, or it has to plan all those changes, not only at the level of the machinery, at the level of the plant, at the level of assets, or at the level of processes, but also at the level of the behaviors and the attitudes of the people. So when an organization is planning a change, it has to plan top down. It has to plan from A to Z, right? At all levels, it needs to plan. It's planning about everything, about the production, about the processes, about the operations, right? And about the behavior and attitudes of the people as well, right? Then we see that there are different approaches to managing change, how you have to overcome this resistance, and what is this resistance to change. We had a discussion on this resistance to change and the factors that that are responsible for this resistance to change, and how it can be overcome, right? So we see that there are a number of individual factors that are causes for resistance to change. For example, the individuals, they just have this fear of unknown. They have the economic fears. They have the security issues that they have. They are into a job, and it is going a routine it has become their habit in a routine way. They come to their offices, do certain tasks, do it in a certain way, and then they go off. Use a particular kind of process, use a particular system, and then they go off. But now suddenly, when you are working in an office on one software, and suddenly you are asked that now the software has changed and we have a new better software to work, and you need to get a training on that software to use that software, and you have to do all your work on that software now. So it will of course be a resistance for the employees, right? So the employees, they will naturally feel resistant towards because that would be out of their routine. They will have to learn it, and there is also a little fear in the minds of the individuals that how it is going to work for them, whether they'll be able to really effectively handle that or not, how it will affect their performance, their productivity, especially when their productivity and performance, they know that it is going to be their pays and their promotions, they're going to be linked to their performance and productivity, and they are heavily reliant on that software for their performance and productivity. So there are certain fears that arise in the minds of the individuals, that how and whether they will be able to learn the new skills effectively, and how it is going to influence them, because previously they were into a set routine, into a set procedure. They had their hands-on experience on using the software that they were previously using. It was giving them a level of the output or production that was up to their satisfaction, or with which they were going on in their routines. and now they don't know how the things are going to shape up and what are the consequences of this introduction of this new software. So they have certain factors, they have certain number of facets or a number of factors that are posing this resistance to change. And then how we discussed that how the organization can overcome this resistance to change, and we discussed a number of strategies that the organization can use to overcome this resistance, and among which we had a discussion on the different educating the employees about the requirement, that why it is needed to bring that resistance to change, why is it necessary to bring that change, and why they should not be resistant to change, but they should be acceptable of this change. So educate the employees that why it is important, and educate all the groups all the groups within the organization to whom this change is relevant, right? And not only educate them, but also show them by value, by calculations, that the proposed change, the desired change, is not only valuable for the shareholders, but it is also equally valuable for the employees and the other stakeholder groups in the organization, right? And then you of course, a very common way and very desired way of winning the commitment of the employees and reducing the resistance to change is by way of participation. Then you take them in the decision-making process, involve them in the problem indicating process, in the problem-solving process, in the decision-making process. The greater their involvement, the more participative they are, the more they are likely to own the actions or to be taken to solve the problem or the changes that need to be made. And we also had a discussion of the different manipulation, co-optation strategies, and we also had a discussion about how the managers, they can use this coercion strategy to reduce this resistance to change, and how the management needs to support the employees to win their commitment by providing them the necessary skills and trainings, and addressing their unknown fears. Then we had discussed the two different approaches to managing change. One was the Lewin's three-step change model, in which he explained that how in the first step towards bringing a change is that you need to unfreeze from the previous equilibrium that the firm or the individuals they are on. You unfreeze that, and then you in the second stage you come into a new equilibrium, and you and in the third stage you need to rephrase yourself into that new equilibrium position. Then we had a discussion of the Porter's 8-step plan for implementing change. Then we had a discussion about this organizational development, that what are the different steps, or what are the different approaches or the strategies that are taken by the organizations to bring the organizational interventions that can enhance the organizational effectiveness and the organizational performance. Then we had a discussion about this creating culture for change, that how this culture for change in the organization, it can be created, how the innovation can be brought about in the organization, why the innovation in the organization is important for change, because we know that we had a discussion on a number of determinants of this innovative culture in the organizations, and we saw that the organizations that are more organic in nature or in structure, they have more flatter structures, and they're more flexible, and the hierarchical relationships and the traditional authority and control are not there in those organizations. Therefore, they are more open to change, and they are more supportive of change, and that innovation is likely to be more in that kind of organizations. We also discussed that the tenure of the manager is can also be an important indicator of the innovation in the organization. So the greater the tenure the manager has in the organization, more time you have spent, more experience you have with the organization, the more familiar you become with the organizational products and the organizational processes, and how to efficiently handle them, how you can bring changes in them, how you can it becomes easier for you even to understand the nature of the problems, to identify the problems. You are more apt to identify the problems when you've spent more time with the organization, with the routine processes and products. So because you have a better mental map in your mind on how the things are working in the organization. What is the map of the things, of the work that is taking place in the organization? You have a better mental map to that. So as a result, you are more capable of identifying the problem and for searching for the alternative solutions to the problem, and for making better decisions and making the bringing in new ideas and new ways of doing the things in the organization. So the innovation is expected to be more in this kind of situations. Then we had a discussion on the learning organization, that how the organization, it becomes a learning organization when it continuously adapts to the changes in the external environment, and when it is a culture that is prone to learning. It is again, it welcomes the new experiences, and it welcomes the risky decisions of the employees, and it is not a risk averse organization, right? And it is continuously learning from the external environment and assimilating that learning into its own culture and its own structure, and by disseminating the information, getting new information from the external market, and assimilating that information and disseminating that information to the different organizational members, and then that information and everything that becomes a part of the organization. And when this process continuously keeps on occurring, then that organization is a learning organization, because it is constantly responding to the environmental cues, right? That was our discussion for the lecture on change for management, or on how the management can manage the change, what are the different forces and the influences on this change management process. For today's lecture, we are going to discuss the organizational culture and the conflict management. What are the different goals that we have set for this lecture? First, we should be able to relate institutionalization to organizational culture, then define organizational culture and describe its common characteristics. You should be able to compare the functional and dysfunctional effects of organizational culture on people and the organization. You should be able to explain the factors that create and sustain an organization's culture. You should be able to show how culture is transmitted to employees. You should be able to demonstrate how an ethical culture can be created. You should be able to describe a positive organizational culture, and you should know how national culture may affect the way organizational culture is transported to a different country. So these are all the different learning outcomes that we have from today's lecture. So what is organizational culture? Of course, we all are familiar with this term organizational culture. We all are somehow familiar, because in most of the discussions and most of the topics that we are talking about, whether they are in the context of organizational behavior, or they are in the context of human resource management, or industrial organizational psychology, or general management thoughts, principles, theories, philosophies, policies, the role of organizational culture, it cannot be underestimated. It has such a strong imprint on the employee attitudes, on the employee behaviors, and on the organizational overall standing, and on the organizational overall image, that its influences on the different organizationally relevant and individual relevant outcomes, they are very strong. They have been reported to be very strong, and therefore its role, it cannot be underestimated. So we have an understanding that organizational culture, it is basically a common perception that is held by the organization's members, a system of shared meaning. So this is a system, or this is the shared meaning that the organizational members, they develop about the organization, the perceptions that they commonly hold about the organization, that is the organizational culture. So this is also termed as the value system of the organization, the norms of the organization, the ways of doing things in the organization, the expected behavior in the organization, the do's and don'ts in the organization. So these all terms, they refer to the organizational culture, and all these ways, things, beliefs, norms of doing things, they are all shared, they are all combined by all the members of the organization. Then what are the different characteristics of the organizational culture? Innovation and risk taking. So certain organizations, they can be more innovative and they can be more risk taking, so that would be their culture. But Certain organizations may not be innovative. They might be more stable organizations, and they might prefer the stable ways of responding and doing things. And some other organizations, they might be more risk-averse organizations, right? So these can be the different. There are a few examples of how different organizations, they can form different organizational cultures depending upon their value system, and depending upon their management's commitment, and so on. So we'll be discussing a number of factors that how the organizational culture is formed, why it is formed like that, right? But the different cultures, they can depict different characteristics, and here are a few examples of those characteristics for you. Then the attention to detail. Some organizations, such as they give greater attention to detail. They are really perfectionist type of organizations, right? And some other, they don't give that much attention to the details, and they're not that perfectionist. Then the outcome orientation. Some organizations, they are really focused on this, the outcomes, not on the products, or not on the processes which are used to arrive at the outcomes, but they are more interested in outcomes. That what are the total number of units produced, or what are the how many sales have been made, but not in the process that was used, or not in the products that were used, but in the outcomes. So they are outcome oriented organizations. And some organizations, they can also be the process oriented organizations, input oriented organizations, that how the work was done, how the contributions were made, right, what processes were used, how the jobs were designed. They focus more on that, right? Then some organizations, they are basically people oriented, right? They're really caring for people, listening to their problems, and also considering their goals and their individual values while making the organizational goals and organizational values, right? And showing a concern for the people's needs and their demands and their motivations, right? So they are the people oriented organizations, right? And some organizations, they can also be the task oriented organizations, right? They just want to get work done, right? And they are not much care for the employees, or for the other stakeholders, right? So such as the organizations that work on the basis of this shareholder model, in which they only want to maximize the profit, and the only purpose of the existence of the organizations is the profitability maximization. What happens in the shareholder model, right? So they are the kind of the organizations. In the team orientation, some organizations, they are this team oriented compared to the other organizations that are individual oriented, or where the tasks are designed in a way that they are individualized tasks. And the team oriented organization, therein the work is done through teams, or through the formation of the groups, right? So the group tasks, group activities, and the group performances, and the group rewards, right? Then the aggressiveness. Some are more aggressive, and some are not. Some are just as I told you, that they prefer the stability, right? So the aggressive organizations, they can, for example, can be expected to bring these radical changes or the radical innovations, and the stable organizations, they are expected to be into this incremental changes, or the incremental innovations, right? So very few and very steady and small changes responding to the external environment, while the radical the aggressive organizations, they can be more into the radical innovations. I have two cases of the two organizations for you, organization A, and the next slide is organization B. I read out these two contrasting organizational cultures of these organizations A and B, and it will be interesting for you to see that how the organizations, these two organizations, because of their different norms and expectations and the values, how they are they have the entirely different cultures and entirely different outlooks, and how the individuals, they can be expected to behave entirely differently in these two different organizations, right? So we have the organization A, which is a manufacturing firm. Managers are expected to fully document all decisions, and good managers are those who can provide detailed data to support their recommendations. So these are the organizations this is the organization that gives that gives really attention to detail, right? And then this creative decisions that incur significant change or risk, they are not encouraged. So it is more a kind of a stable organization, because managers of failed projects are openly criticized and penalized. Managers try not to implement ideas that deviate much from the status quo. So the characteristics of a stable organization where the innovation is not encouraged. Then one lower level manager quoted an often used phrase in the company: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right, so the culture of the initiative and the culture of aggressiveness, that is not supported. So unless something has gone wrong, you don't need to do anything about it. While that does not happen in the organizations that have the more risk-taking and the more innovative culture and that have more aggressive approach, then there are extensive rules and regulations in this firm that employees are required to follow. Managers supervise employees closely to ensure there are no deviations. Right, so there are strict controls, there are strict rules and regulations, there are more of a, you can say, that bureaucratic structure in this organization, and the employees, they have to stick to those rules, and they have to be in strict compliance with those rules and regulations, and they are to be monitored by their managers on if there are any deviations. Then management is concerned with high productivity regardless of the impact on employee morale or turnover. So as we discussed that this is not the characteristic of an employee-oriented culture, but this is a very task-oriented culture where the preference or where the importance is given to the task orientation or to the productivity and the performance, but not to the employee morale and employee attitude and employee turnover and to their satisfaction and commitment. Then the work activities, they are designed around individuals. There are distinct departments and lines of authority, and employees are expected to minimize formal contact with other employees outside their functional area or line of command. So it is the organization follows a strict functional structure wherein there is departmentalization, and there are the different, on the basis of the activities of on the basis of the different jobs, the different activities, they have been departmentalized, right? And there is and between these departments, the encouragement is that there is minimal contact between these departments, right? And the formal, there is line of command, and that has to be followed. Then the performance evaluations and rewards, they emphasize individual effort, although seniority tends to be the primary factor in the determination of pay raises and promotions. So here the next is what we see is that the performance appraisals or the performance evaluations that are done on an individual basis, which means that this is not a team oriented culture, and seniority tends to be the primary factor in the determination of pay raises and promotions. Then on the other hand, we have the organization B culture. Let's see that how this culture is contrasting the A organization's culture. This is again another manufacturing firm, so we have a very good comparison. Both are manufacturing firms. Here, however, management encourages and rewards risk-taking and change. Decisions based on intuition are valued as much as those that are well rationalized. Management prides itself on its history of experimenting with new technologies and its success in regularly introducing innovation products. Managers or employees who have a good idea are encouraged to run with it, right? So innovation is encouraged in innovation-oriented culture, and failures are treated as learning experiences. The company prides itself on being market-driven and rapidly responsive to the changing needs of the customers. So more aggressive, more innovative culture, but not stable, right? Risk-taking also. There are few rules and regulations for employees to follow, and supervision is loose because management believes that its employees are hardworking and trustworthy. So management concerned with high productivity but believes that this comes through treating its people right? So they are employee oriented. The company is proud of its reputation and as being a good place to work. Job activities are designed around work teams, team oriented, and team members are encouraged to interact with people across functions and authority levels. Employees talk positively about the competition between teams. Individuals and teams have goals, but bonuses are based on achievement of these outcomes. Employees are given considerable autonomy in choosing the means by which the goals are attained, right? So there is considerable autonomy and there is task significance, and the jobs are designed rich in this culture compared to the organization A's culture where the jobs were not rich, right? So there was no employees were not empowered. Herein the employees are empowered, they can make the decisions, right? And they have the autonomy to how they have to achieve the goals, right? And the rules and regulations are not that strict, right? And the previous organization A's culture, we saw that the employees do not have much autonomy, and they have to follow the strict rules and regulations, and they are being measured, or they are being supervised by their managers against any deviations if they do from the workplace rules and policies and regulations. So if we kept on making the comparison at all the different stages in these two descriptions, that how their cultures differ. Then the culture is descriptive. Of course, the people's shared understanding of the organizational characteristics. It does not express their liking or disliking. People at different hierarchical levels, departments, they develop uniform perceptions of culture, right? So it is not about their personal liking or disliking, but it is about how the things are like, right, and how the organizational characteristics are. So it is a shared perception of the individuals about that, right? And whether you are at a top level manager, or you are a bottom level manager, or you are a shop floor worker, or you are a CEO, culture is one which is shared by employees at all levels, right? So irrespective of your hierarchical level, you share the same perceptions, or you have the same ideas about how this organization is like, what are the norms and values of this organization. So there is uniform perception. That is the organizational culture. Then an organization can have a dominant culture and can also have a subcultures. The dominant culture is the one that expresses the core values that are shared by a majority of the organization's members. So it is on the level of the organization on the whole. That is the dominant culture. That what are the overall values, or what is the overall value system, or the norms of the organization, overall expectations of the whole organization, what it promotes, what it does not promote, and what messages it gives and what it does not give, right? Subcultures, there can be a number of subcultures within that main or within that dominant organizational culture. So the dominant culture is also, we can say that the corporate culture of the organization, right? And the subcultures, they are the mini cultures within an organization, typically defined by department designations and geographical separations, such as the different SBUs in our organization. They can have the different mini subcultures, right? The different SBUs having the different subcultures, because then SBU wise, the geographical distribution wise, or but the department wise, even within a same within one SBU, under the different functions that it is performing, each function might have a different mini culture or a different subculture, right? And but the overall dominant culture, or over the organization or the corporate culture, that is one within the organization, and that dominant and the corporate culture is basically the identity of that organization, that how that is like. And your mini cultures, they also need to be, and they must be in line with that corporate or the dominant culture. And that dominant culture is basically a guide to all the different sub departments or the sub units or the different divisions of the organization or whatever. That is basically a guide that how the other cultures, they should expected to grow. So they grow, there might be some changes in those mini cultures, but they are in line with the dominant culture. So the core values, or the dominant values that are accepted throughout the organizations, that come from this dominant culture. And then this strong culture is the one in which the core values are intensely held and widely shared, right? So that is a strong culture. If the organization does not have a strong culture, then it means that its value system, or the signals through which the values are being sent to the different individuals, they are not strong in a weak culture, right? And in a weak culture, the shared perceptions, they are not strong, right? Or different individuals, if they have different perceptions about same behavior, or how our behavior should be performed, then it means that their values are not shared, or their perceptions are not shared, their expectations or their understanding is not shared about how certain things should go and should not go. Then that is not a strong culture, that is a weak culture. Strong culture is one in which there is shared understanding, and in which there is a strong signals coming from the organization to the members that okay, this act is commendable and this act is punishable. We should do this way and we should not do this way. Then strong culture is associated with positive organizational outcomes such as performance, profitability and growth, etc. So what are the different elements of a strong culture? If I explain to you, a study shows that there are three factors that can contribute to this formation of the strong culture, that determine the strength of the culture. One is that this consistency, that there should be consistency between the organizational policies, right? So if an organization is a team oriented culture, if it has a team oriented culture, then there should be that work should be designed around teams. The individuals who are within that team, they should be individually and they should be mutually accountable for their performance, right? And the performance rewards, they should be tied to their collective effort, but not to their individual effort. So that is that the policies, they are consistent. So if you are your work design is such that you are following this teamwork, right? Then within the teamwork, you tie the performance of the employees with that teamwork. They're accountable mutually. And two, you also tie their performance evaluations, their rewards with the collective effort or with the collective output, but not with the individual output. So because if you are giving them the tasks that are group tasks or the group goals, but you are measuring their performance on the individual output, then there is not a match between these two practices, right? So then that will not it means that there is not consistency between the practices, and it will not give a strong image to or it will not give a strong signals to the individuals or the team members, right, about the team orientation or about the team oriented culture, and the culture will become weak. Then the consensus, there should be consensus between the managers and at all levels about the development of the culture, right? So when a certain practices implemented in the organization, there should be consensus between the managers at all levels, because if there is no consensus between managers, they are not agreed themselves. One manager has a different opinion and other manager has a different opinion, then again it is not going to give very strong signals to the individuals, right? So if I have two bosses and one boss is saying one thing and the other is saying one thing, they are not agreeing with each other, then of course it's not going to give me and my colleagues a very strong signals, right, about particular HR practices or whatever. So then that is again it will again weaken the culture, because the signals will be weak, the shared perceptions will be weak. So one employee, he might perceive what one manager is saying, another employee might perceive what another manager is saying, and the shared perceptions won't be able to develop, right, and the strong message won't be coming, right, because there is no agreement between the managers themselves. Then they should be distinct, the practices. The employees, they should be able to see that this practice is, or this policy that is being adopted by the organization, and this is another policy that is being adopted in an organization, and these policies, they are distinct from each other, and they are and that they are related to the distinct outcomes as well. That should be there. If that element is not there, again the culture is not going to be strong. So the strong and positive culture, that may include empowering employees, having team orientation, clear strategic direction should be there, and there should be a strong vision. So these are the factors that can promote a strong culture. Okay, then culture versus formalization. If we make a comparison between the two, the formalization, we know that in the formalization there is the rules and regulations and the policies, they are very clear, right, and everything is formalized as the name indicates, right. But the research and the theory states that if the culture is strong in an organization, then even the lesser degree of formalization will be enough in the organization, and because a strong organizational culture, that will replace the level of the formalization in the low level of formalization in the organization, and that strong culture will act as a formalization in the organization, because still the members, they will be getting strong signals that of sanctioned behaviors and of the desired behaviors, right. So the strong culture, it increases the behavioral consistency and can act as a substitute for formalization. Then the organizational culture versus national culture, if we make a comparison. National culture, of course, it has a greater impact on the employees than does their organizational culture, because of course when the individual is born, since then he starts getting the imprints on his mind about the values of that of his country, of his nation, and the norms from his parents, from his family, and from his external environment. He starts getting the cues of the desirable behaviors and the undesirable behaviors, and how the nation, as a nation, what are the different expectations from him as that particular nation's member. Right, so of course national culture has a very strong and deep down impact compared to the organizational culture, which the individual might have joined some period ago. So the nationals, they selected to work for foreign companies, they may be atypical of the local native population. That is the reason, because if you and that is a reason some of the companies, they also tend to fail, such as if I quote you the example of the Walmart, which is one of the largest retailers in the world. When they entered the German market and they opened their Walmart store there, they could not succeed there because they tried to implement their corporate culture into the German market, and we know that in Germany the trade unions are very strong, and the Germans' own culture is very strong, and the people are very particular about their norms and their values, right? And when the Walmart it opened up its outlet in the Germany, and they tried to introduce their own dress code, their own language in there. The people, they speak Germany, and they only tend to speak Germany. They don't want to speak English. They're not very responsive to that. So when the Walmart tried to introduce its own culture while operating in the territory of Germany, the people, they were resistant to that, and the Germany, majorly because of the cultural differences, because of the differences in the dress code, because in the expectations of the managers from the employees who were basically the hired from the German labor market. So there were differences between them. There were differences in their languages, in their expectations, in the ways of doing things, in the value system. There were differences what the managers who were basically coming from the Walmart and who were from the US origin, how they were the differences in their value systems, and they expected the employees who were hired from the German labor market, they expected them to behave and to adopt their values, but that was not possible because those were the values in the German employees that were coming from their national culture, right? So in that organization, they could not adopt those values because they did not own those values of that organization, right? So national culture is greater impact on the employee than the organizational culture. So what does a culture do? It has some important functions to perform. Basically, it defines the boundary between one organization and the other organization, right? So it is a kind of an identity of the organization, right? So it conveys a sense of identity for its members, and it is also the organizational culture also sets its own identity when it is making a boundary from one organization from the other organization. Then it facilitates the generation of commitment to something larger than self-interest. Then it enhances the stability of the social system. It serves as a sense-making and control mechanism for fitting employees in the organization. You must all be familiar with this Disneyland and the Disney theme parks. The employees there, they are attractive universally owing to the strong culture at Disney. The employees, they are known to be friendly, clean and attractive. So that is the culture that is prevalent in Disney, and the employees there are known worldwide, and they are very attractive worldwide for that. So this is how the culture, it becomes the identity of the organization, and it also becomes the identity of the individuals. Culture can sometimes become a liability. And when are those cases? One, when it becomes a barrier to change. We know that sometimes when the organizations, they follow a certain kind of a culture and they are sticking to that culture for making their organizational decisions, or when the culture of the organization is very stable, it is not very aggressive and it is not very innovative, right? Then it can and the organization is operating in a stable environment, but it's not very open to change, it's not very learning organization, it is not very responsive to the external environment changes, and the managers, they keep on making the decisions in the organization basing on the past, on the history, right? And such as what were the trends for the product in the past and what are the trends now, and so on. So these are the cases in which even when an organization is operating very successfully, but it may not keep on operating successfully in the future because the culture might be very much closed, right, and it might not be very responsive, right, and the managers, they may also be a little afraid, they might be a little afraid of the change that might be the requirement from the external environment, but the managers, they might be afraid because the things are happening, the processes and the routines and the behaviors of the people, they are set, their habits are being made, right, and the routines have developed, and the managers might be afraid that if they bring in any change in the organization, that might be the employees may not respond very positively to that change, and the managers, they are afraid of those responses of the employees, so they may not bring the change, even if they know at heart that the change is required, right? So sometimes the change is not brought, and sometimes it's not only the employees who are resistant to change, but sometimes the managers themselves are resistant to change because of the fears that they have in their minds. Right, so in that kind of cases where the organizational culture is really strong, right, and then the culture itself becomes a barrier to change when it is strong, right? And in this kind of cases, the strategic drift can occur. I explained to you, I think, in one of my presentations, that what is the concept of the strategic drift, that even if the firm has core competencies in certain areas, and as a result of those core competencies, they are providing the firm the strategic advantage in the market, and they are competitive in the market, but those core competencies they can become the core rigidities of the companies if they don't keep on constantly updating those core competencies in response to the external environment. So if a firm is if a firm is very much technologically abreast, right? It is competing on the basis of the technology, such as if we take the example of Apple, which is competing on the basis of the technology, and it is bringing constant innovations, radical innovations into the products that it is offering, right? So if it stops bringing those radical innovations into its products, so that technology and those radical innovations are basically the core competence of Apple. If it stops bringing those technological advancements and continually if it stops to update its products, then it won't be able to stay competitive in the market in the long run, and its core competencies will become its core rigidities, and it will be left behind the market, because then its competitors, they will bring in more changes in the market, they might bring in more innovative products, and they might win the market share from the Apple as well, right? So in order to keep your core competencies, and if in order not to let them transfer into your core rigidities, what you need to do is that you need to constantly update your core competencies, and so that you can follow what are the requirements from the external environment, right? So in a strong cultures, what happens is that your core competencies, they tended to convert into your core rigidities, right? And as a result, the strategic drift happens. So strategic drift is when the organization is unable to, changes in the organization are very much small and incremental, and they're not enough to keep pace with the changes in the external market or the external environment. Then we have the barriers to diversity. So the strong culture may eliminate strengths coming from diverse people. That is one of the barriers to diversity, because of course there is this clash when we talk about the diversity management, and there is this challenge for the managers, because on one hand we say that the diversity is really good for the organization, because when the people of different backgrounds, they are coming in the organization, then they can really bring in the new ideas, and the organization can really benefit from it, from the innovative ideas and from the creative potential of the people, and the organization can really transform into an innovative and learning organization. But the implications of this for the managers are, on one hand, when the people of different backgrounds and the different ideas are coming, then some of those people, they may bring their own values and they may bring their own ideas with them, and as a result their ideas and values, they may not match with the organizational culture, and there might be a conflict between the two. So the organization, what it would try to do is that it would try to bring a match between these two, and as a result those organizations, those individuals, they may be forced to change their values and their behavior, and so as they can absorb well in the organizational culture. So then that it is a barrier to diversity when the individuals, they are losing their unique points in order to be assimilated into the organizational culture. Then the organization culture, it can also be a barrier to acquisitions and mergers. 58% of the mergers, they fail due to the cultural barriers, the mergers that take place between the organizations, because when the merger is taking place, then the two organizations, the two identities, when they are combining, when they are joining hands, then the managers, there can be the conflicting values and maybe mismatch in the opinions and the value system of the two types of employees that are joining together and who have to work together now. So this mismatch of culture, that is that shows to be a major reason in the failure of these acquisitions and mergers. So now the companies, when they study the financials and the other ratios and the other aspects of the mergers and acquisitions, which were considered important ones, now they also consider the cultural aspect of this merger and innovation. This is also considered equally important. So it is that organizational culture, it is the top managers or the CEOs of the company. When the company is being founded, then he is basically responsible, because he has to start with a company. He is basically the first person who is bringing in his ideas, and on the basis of his ideology, of his beliefs, of his certain assumptions, he builds the organization, makes the organization, and he passes on those same expectations to the employees and the members, and he is thus the founder in forming the organizational culture. Then of course it can be promoted, the organizational culture, it can be there are certain other factors as well, such as the selection. At the time of the selection, you tell the candidates that what are your expectations, and you provide complete information to the candidate as well about what the organization is like. So at the time of the selection, the candidate gets strong signals about what the organization is like, from the selection procedures of the organization, from the fairness procedures it uses, from the ethical procedures it uses. The candidate gets signals that how the organization is like what it values and what it puts emphasis on, right? So at that time you need to make a fit between the person and the organization by checking out what are the values and the cultures of the organization, and whether he can fit in with the organization and within that particular job requirements. Then of course the top management, as we discussed, that the senior executives, they help establish behavioral norms that are adopted by the organization. So they act as role models themselves, and they are themselves the role models for the employees on what is expected and how they should behave. Then the socialization process, it also helps the new employees to adapt to the organization's culture. So it is the philosophy of the organization's founders, then the selection criteria, then the top management acting as the role models, and the socialization, different socialization processes in the organizations, they all contribute to the formation of the organizational culture. The socialization process, when we talk about it, there are three different, there are three stages in the socialization process. One is the pre-arrival stage, then the encounter, then metamorphosis, and then it leads to the number of outcomes. So let's have this discussion on these stages one by one. The pre-arrival stage is the stage in which the individual's norms and the values that are formed, he's socialized with even before entering the organization, such as individuals in the business schools. They are being familiarized with what are the requirements of the different firms or the different business organizations who hire the MBAs, what is the culture in those organizations, what are the expectations from those MBA graduates by those their potential employers, right? So they are also given even sometimes they are also given the short visits to those companies during their it is part of their coursework that they go to visit to the different companies in order to familiarize themselves with the norms of those organizations, of those business entities. And sometimes the organizations, they also arrange the courses from the business executives for those MBAs or the other business students, right? That is the familiarization or socialization at the pre-arrival stage. Then the encounter stage, when the individual actually enters the organization. Then he sees that what are his values and what are the organizational values, what are the organizational expectations. Then he actually sees, and he also identifies there if there is a mismatch between those two. So if there is a huge dichotomy between his expectations, his values, and what the organization actually is, then the individual may resign, but it often does not happen. Then the metamorphosis stage is that if there are any differences between the two, he tries to absorb the organizational values and culture into himself, and he tries to internalize with those organizational cultural values. Then of course there are the formal versus informal, the training and orientation programs versus no special attention employee put directly to job, right? So that is the informal method where there is no attention, there is no to the training and the formal ways of socializing. Then there is this investiture and the divestiture, in which the emphasis is certain qualities that are required for the job and it's not flexible, and in the divestiture the socialization tries to strip away certain characteristics of recruit. Then the individual versus collective, where the new members are socialized individually. In a collective way, then the members they share their identical experiences, and then they are socialized collectively. Then we have the fixed versus the variable. In the fixed culture, the time schedule in which the newcomer is programmed to socialize, such as the rotation period for 2 months in this department, whole employee development plan is scheduled. Whereas the variable is when there is no such plan and there is no career path for the individual, that how and after how much time he will be promoted, or after how much time he will be rotated to this place and this place, etc. Then the serial versus random. Serial is when role models or the mentors they train the newcomer, and the random is that there are no role models and there are no mentors, they have to do it all on their own. So the research shows that the formal, collective, fixed, serial and divestiture is socialization options. They are adopted by the management. They lead to greater conformity by the newcomers as per research. So they tend to be more internalizing with organizational culture when the organization adopts these options. Then of course we are all familiar that organizations they use that stories from within the organization, the success stories of the organization, to familiarize the employees with the organizational culture. Then they use different rituals. Then there are a number of symbols that the organizations use by way of the organization, the acronyms, etc., which are used to describe equipment, processes, key products or personnel that assimilate in organizational members and keep culture alive. So ethical organizational culture, of course we discussed many times this ethics and the ethical standards, and we know that the ethical organizational culture is one that focuses more on the means than on outcomes, how things are done, whether they are done ethically or not only emphasizing on the outcome that has to be reached, right? So they are low to moderate in aggressiveness, and they have high tolerance for risk. Then a customer responsive culture that needs to be created, right? And for that kind of culture, the types of employees hired by the organization, it is important to see what are the personalities of the employees. Some employees are more focused on service and some are not. Then the low formalization, the freedom to meet customer service requirement. Empowering the employees is important in making decisions so that they can more accommodate the customers, right? And then role clarity that allows service employees to act as boundary spanners, and the employees who engage in organizational citizenship behaviors, they also tend to report higher customer responsive culture, or they tend to be more responsible or responsive towards the customers, and the customers are more satisfied with them. So managers can do a number of steps to create this customer responsive culture, such as select the employees with personality and attitudes which are consistent with high service orientation, then train and socialize the current employees to be more customer focused, change organizational structure to give employees more control, and empower employees to make decisions. Then here we see that the organizational culture has an impact on performance and satisfaction, right? The more, of course, the innovative and risk-taking it is, the more it gives attention to detail, and the more other factors that we discussed earlier, other characteristics of the organizational culture that we discussed earlier, the more the higher the organization is on these, then this culture is perceived as strong, and it leads to high performance and satisfaction. So the strength of the culture is very important determinant in determining the overall in determining the outcomes in the organization. So here I have a few questions for you that try to answer these questions after reading the try to solve these yourself and then try to see the answers, right? So this was the discussion that we made today on what the organizational culture is. We had a discussion on how the different organizations, they can have different cultures, right? And we discussed a few key characteristics that differentiate one culture from the other. We also discussed that how the culture it becomes the identity of the organization, and it not only for the organization but also of the employees. They need to identify with the culture, how the individuals, they can enter into the different socialization processes and so on. So we just had a whole lot of discussion on all these different topics in the organizational culture. I hope you had a good listening. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.